In today's review, we will continue with the Void Trilogy written by Peter F. Hamilton, and we'll take a closer look at its second entry, the Temporal Void, which was published in 2008 and is 746 pages long. Thus, it is somewhat longer than the first entry into the series, the Dreaming Void. The semi-objective parameters of the Temporal Void related to the science fiction hardness, the scope of the literary world/universe, the amount of original and unique ideas, as well as the overall amount of main and side characters, are more or less identical to the Dreaming Void, which is not surprising since these novels tell an uninterrupted story without any significant jumps in time. As with all the other books of the Commonwealth universe that we have discussed so far, there are no indications for any awards or even award nominations for the Temporal Void. In terms of popular reception, the Temporal Void scores 4.3 out of 5 stars based on thousands of Goodreads, LibraryThing and Amazon reviews. Thus, it scores slightly higher than its predecessor, the Dreaming Void, which makes this another example for the quote-unquote higher volume number equals higher ratings phenomenon that I mentioned in a couple of previous videos already. The story of the Temporal Void continues directly after the events of the Dreaming Void. Therefore, if you have not read the latter, you should proceed with caution, since the summary of the plot of the Temporal Void will contain some spoilers for the first entry of the series. So, beware. The date for the launch of the pilgrimage into the Void by the Church of Living Dream approaches, causing considerable turmoil within the intersolar Commonwealth. The external threat from the Osaisan Empire materializes in the form of a fast-approaching fleet of warships that wants to put an indiscriminately violent end to the pilgrimage, whereas the different factions within humanity are embroiled in an increasingly self-destructive power struggle over the course of humanity's future. At the same time, the hunt for the second dreamer and for Inigo, the first dreamer, continues at a more urgent pace and intensifies even further. In addition, the events that transpired in the Void in the past and which are recounted through Inigo's dreams are also continued within the scope of the novel The Temporal Void. Edeard, who had to flee from his pillaged village in the countryside to the bustling city of Magathran, is moving up the ranks as a constable of the city. His increasingly infamous exploits fighting crime grant him more and more access to the upper echelons of Magathran society. While he is able to hone his skills and abilities, the difficulty and danger of his assignments grow equally. Ultimately, he uncovers a conspiracy that threatens the status quo in the city, but also him personally as well. Will he be able to find a way to surmount these challenges? My general impressions related to the Temporal Void are for the most part similar to what I have already conveyed in the previous review video of the Dreaming Void, and I will therefore refrain from just recounting everything once more. I will add, however, that specifically the increasingly detailed description of Magathran, its societal structure, and the resulting political games are something that stood out positively in the Temporal Void. Edeard's story is certainly at a high point in the second book of the trilogy, although towards the end there are indications for an increasingly noticeable power creep.
It's over 9,000!
But this is a minor criticism, for now at least. Furthermore, the storylines that take place in the Commonwealth start to pick up pace in the Temporal Void as well. Here, the hunt for the second dreamer and how this individual manages to elude the agents of the various factions is one highlight. It certainly helps that the second dreamer is probably one of the most relatable characters outside of the Void. In addition, the socially inept and borderline autistic Troblum, who is a so-called hire and works for one of the various human factions, is also a somewhat interesting counterpoint to the oftentimes mature and demure demeanor of most hires. It is even funnier that Troblum seems to have some kind of social etiquette software that advises him on how to act properly, but he simply chooses to ignore it. The Temporal Void gives a clearer picture in terms of the general machinations of the different human factions and their specific goals as well. In the first book, it was all a rather Byzantine affair where it was not exactly clear what was going on and who tried to do what based on which specific motivation. While this aspect improves in the Temporal Void, it is still not ideal in my opinion, as there are some factions that were introduced in the first book but still seem to have no actual goal or stance related to the whole pilgrimage. This is a bit odd considering that the pilgrimage and its potential side effects are not something where you have the possibility to abstain and sit on the sidelines. Overall, the Temporal Void competently continues the Void Trilogy. Unsurprisingly, due to it being part of the Void Trilogy, the Temporal Void remains a soft science fiction / science fantasy / full-on fantasy novel set in a literary universe of vast proportions, with a plethora of novelties and with a large list of main and side characters that for the most part are more or less efficient in conveying the story. There are fewer sluggish parts, the story is paced, mostly at least, faster than in the first book, and the motivations of the different factions are established now, both in the plot within the Void itself and the plots in the Commonwealth. To sum up, if you enjoyed reading the first novel of the series, picking up the Temporal Void is really a no-brainer. If you liked this video, you may also enjoy the other reviews and content on my channel. Feel free to leave a comment if you want to discuss the novels or if you want to suggest other books that I should review in the future. Please consider upvoting and subscribing, it is much appreciated. Thank you for watching and until next time.